Pokeballs are a central piece of the Pokemon games, but not all are created equal. Today, I'll be counting down the top 10 worst Pokeballs based solely on their usefulness, or should I say uselessness, and not their appearance. In other words, this video is meant for people who could not care less what Pokeball their Pokemon are caught in and just want to know which ones not to waste their money on. Number 10, the Dive Ball. Before I get too deep into this, pun intended, I should explain how catch rate modifiers for Pokeballs work. This is the complicated formula that runs every time you try to catch a Pokemon, and what Pokeball you use determines this bonus ball number. A normal Pokeball has a catch modifier of 1 times, meaning it has no impact on the overall formula. Other Pokeballs do modify it though, such as the Great Ball multiplying it by 1.5 times, or Ultra by 2. And a higher modifier means a higher chance of success. The Dive Ball has a 3.5 times catch rate modifier if the Pokemon is water dwelling. In most games, that means while the player is surfing, fishing, or diving, and in Scarlet and Violet, it means the Pokemon is literally in the water. It's a useful Pokeball when catching Pokemon when that situation applies, since 3.5 times is quite a bit higher than the Ultra Ball's 2 times. However, there are 2 reasons it made it onto this list. The first and less important reason is that in Gen 3, when the Dive Ball was introduced, it only worked underwater while diving. Do you know how many different wild Pokemon can be found underwater in Gen 3 Hoenn? It's 3. Chinchou, Relicanth, and Clamperl. A Dive Ball only helps you get a grand total of 6 Dex entries. This does not apply today though, so it's not that big of a deal. The second reason, the more significant one in my eyes, is that there's basically no reason to ever use a Dive Ball over a Net Ball. If you don't care about aesthetics, I'll admit the Dive Ball looks a lot better than the Net Ball does, but this video isn't about aesthetics. A Net Ball also has a 3.5 times catch rate, but it has that for water-type Pokemon regardless of where they're found. A Wugtrio on the beach is not affected by a Dive Ball, but it is by a Net Ball. Since the vast majority of Pokemon you encounter surfing, fishing, or diving are water-type Pokemon, that means a Net Ball applies everywhere a Dive Ball does, and more, since it works on water-type Pokemon on land. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned, Net Balls also work on all bug-type Pokemon, which tend to not be in the water overall. So like, that is so many more Pokemon. A Net Ball is superior to a Dive Ball in virtually every situation. There are exceptions like Dratini or Tynamo or Hisuian Quillfish, but those are so few and far between. A Net Ball's gonna work basically everywhere that a Dive Ball does and costs the exact same. So that forces Dive Ball onto this list. Number 9, the Repeat Ball. A Repeat Ball has a modifier of 3.5 times, same as the Dive Ball, so that's pretty good, but only if the Pokemon has been registered in the person's Pokedex before. That means that in the process of completing one's Pokedex, a Repeat Ball is just not useful to you, unless you're trying to catch a second Slowpoke to make into a Slowking, for example. That means it's just a more expensive Pokeball most of the time, and therefore not worth the money. However, it's not completely useless, at least it hasn't been for me. Throughout all of the John Michael Cup competitions I have with PM7 over on MandJTV Plays, we use a lot of Repeat Balls since the competitions often involve catching a lot of Pokemon, and we're playing in games where we've completed the Pokedex. A Repeat Ball is usually our best bet if the Quick Ball fails. Another situation where the Repeat Ball could come in handy is when shiny hunting. Most of the time when you find a shiny Pokemon, and virtually every time if you're an avid shiny hunter with the shiny charm, it's a Pokemon you've caught before. If no other specific Pokeballs apply to the catching situation, and you don't care about what ball you get it in, a Repeat Ball is a very solid option to snag that shiny. But for the average player, once you catch a specific species, there will be few times you'll want to catch it again in the same game. Therefore, the Repeat Ball is not very useful for most casual players. Number 8. The Dream Ball. The Dream Ball is an odd ball. In Generation 5, it was used to catch Pokemon in Entree Forest that the player imported to their DS game from the Dream World, the online function that is no longer available. These balls were guaranteed to catch those Dream World Pokemon, and they weren't used or seen anywhere else. The ball then became absent for several generations until it returned in Sword and Shield, where the ball guy would give you a single Dream Ball at Winden Stadium, but with no way to get any more outside of an event. This new updated version of the Dream Ball has a 4x catch rate modifier on Pokemon that are asleep. The Dream Ball returns in Scarlet and Violet with the same 4x on sleeping Pokemon catch rate situation, and there are ways to get more than one, albeit late game and not easy. As for the usefulness of the ball, it's solid. 4x catch rate is better than most, equal to a timer ball after 10 turns, and considering sleep is the status condition that improves catch chances the most, it combos well. The problem is that if you have no way to induce sleep in the target Pokemon, then a Dream Ball is only as good as a Pokeball, unless you're battling a Pokemon that has rest, but that's only very few of them. If you're using a Pokemon like a False Swipe Spore Breloom, which I like to use for catching Pokemon, then it works very well. However, if you're trying to catch Pokemon with just your playthrough team, whether you have a sleep-inducing move kind of depends on your playstyle, and me personally, I don't most of the time, which means the Dream Ball doesn't work well for me most of the time. But even if you have a way to force sleep, the Dream Ball is still here due to its difficulty to obtain. If you could just buy it in any mart, I don't think it would be on this list, but it's exceedingly difficult to get. Very limited in Gen 8, very late game in Gen 9, and all it can do is tie a timer ball. I don't see why you'd go to all that effort if you don't care about the looks. Number 7, the Level Ball. I think the Level Ball looks pretty cool, even despite the L being rotated, making it look like a V. The Level Ball works based on how the target Pokemon's level compares to the Pokemon you're using. If your Pokemon is the same or lower level than the wild one, a Level Ball is just a regular Pokeball. Higher but less than double, it's an Ultra Ball, 2x. More than double but less than quadruple, 4x. Then quadruple or higher, a huge catch rate modifier of 8x. 8x is super impressive. There's only one other non-Master Ball ball that can reach that high. However, the problem though comes from the situation in which you get that catch rate modifier. Due to the comparison situation, a Level Ball is more useful the higher level you are and the lower level the wild Pokemon is. But low level Pokemon are famously easy to catch in most situations. Trying to catch an early route Pokemon with a Level Ball is like trying to kill a bug with a bazooka. Level Balls are also difficult or impossible to obtain in most games and are often found late. This hurts their viability since in modern Pokemon games, late game Pokemon you encounter will be up in the 60s or 70s, meaning it's impossible to get to double their level, which means a Level Ball is just an Ultra Ball at best. A Level Ball could be great for a shiny you happen to find on an early route, but practically, they're not worth the effort to obtain. Number 6, the Nest Ball. The Nest Ball is another Pokeball that cares about the level of the Pokemon that you're trying to catch. However, it differs from the Level Ball because it does not care what your Pokemon's level is. It uses a formula of 41 minus the target Pokemon's level, then dividing that difference by 10. So if the Pokemon is level 5, the catch rate modifier is 3.6x. Because of the way this formula works, a Nest Ball is only as effective as a Pokeball on any Pokemon level 30 or above. I thought it would be above 30, but apparently there must be some coding reason why you can't have a catch rate modifier of 1.1 times. You know, because 41 minus 30, 11 divided by 10, 1.1, but like apparently that's not a thing. The Nest Ball's catch rate modifier maxes at 4 times for wild level 1 Pokemon, which I should mention are extremely few and far between. Now 4 times is a really good catch rate modifier as I've discussed, but as I mentioned in the Level Ball section, low level Pokemon tend to be really easy to catch. And the 4 times is just the best it gets. But for me, what's really the nail in the coffin, or should I say the large industrial spike, is its price. One Nest Ball is 1,000 Poké-Dollars, the same as the Quick, Timer, Dusk, and Net Balls, all of which are more useful in more situations. If it cost just a little bit more than a Pokeball, I think it would be a pretty solid Pokeball, at least for the early game. But it's not. It's hella expensive, and it's only useful for catching low-level Pokemon, which you're probably just gonna catch with a Quick Ball anyways. Number 5, the Lure Ball. The Lure Ball has had its catch rate modifier changed more than any other ball. Its effect is always activated when fishing, but in Johto it's 3 times, Alola 5 times, Galar 4 times, and Paldea 1 times. Supposedly, the Lure Ball in Scarlet and Violet is supposed to function like the Dive Ball, where if the Pokemon is physically in the water, you get the boost. Which of the boosts? We don't know, because it doesn't actually do anything. Bulbapedia says this is a bug, but despite Scarlet and Violet being full of them, I'm still skeptical, because fishing isn't a thing in Paldea, and the Lure Ball's always just been for fishing. But even in the games where it does work as normal, it's still not great. A Dive Ball works in all the same places and more, and I already discussed how a Net Ball is better than that. Yes, the Lure Ball has a higher catch rate than those in Alola and Galar, but not in Johto, where it's the easiest to obtain of all the regions. In summation, if you are trying to catch something in the water, use a Net Ball. If it happens to not be water type, use a Dive Ball. A Lure Ball is basically never worth it. Number 4, the Beast Ball. The Beast Ball was designed for Ultra Beasts to an extreme degree. If used on an Ultra Beast, the catch modifier is 5 times, which is quite high. It's the second best you can get outside of the guaranteed capture Master Ball. However, that catch rate might as well be higher because trying to use any other Pokeball on an Ultra Beast is a recipe for misery. That's because any non-Beast Ball used on an Ultra Beast, except a Master Ball, has a catch rate of 0.1 times. You heard that correctly. All of them become as 10th of a good... Jesus. You heard that correctly. All of them, except the Master Ball, become 1/10 as good as a Pokeball. The Beast Ball is not immune to that though. It suffers the same fate on every other Pokemon. A Beast Ball used on any non-Ultra Beast Pokemon gets a catch rate of 0.1 times, which, in case I haven't mentioned but should be obvious, is the worst in the game. Trying to use a Beast Ball anywhere except a guaranteed capture Terra Raid is just, like, you're just taking on an intentional challenge. But it's not even really a challenge that you can get better at. There's no skill, it's just making yourself less lucky. It's awful. Scarlet and Violet do not have the Ultra Beasts, which means you're only going to use a Beast Ball in a Terra Raid for aesthetics or make yourself miserable. That means it's a really bad Pokeball in Scarlet and Violet, but it's not higher on this list because if you are dealing with an Ultra Beast, they're mandatory. Number 3, the Moon Ball. The Moon Ball sounds like it would do what the Dusk Ball does. Work better at night. It was introduced in Gen 2, the same generation that added day and night cycles, so that's another reason to think it's a nighttime focused ball. But it's not. Instead, it gives you a 4 times modifier on any Pokemon that's part of a family that involves a Moonstone. That is way too specific. That means the Moon Ball only works on the Nidoking, Nidoqueen, Clefable, Wigglytuff, Delcatty, and Masharna evolutionary lines. That's only 16 Pokemon out of over 1,000. And the Delcatty and Masharna lines aren't even present in the Johto games, where the Moon Ball is easiest to obtain. But even worse, due to a programming error, it never gets the catch rate in Gen 2, which means it only ever gets a boosted rate in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Just those 2 games on a list of very specific Pokemon. I will readily admit that the Moon Ball looks cool, but for practical purposes, it's almost never going to be helpful. Number 2, the Heal Ball. The Heal Ball is spectacularly terrible. It was added in Gen 4 alongside the Dusk and Quick Balls, balls that would immediately become titans of the game that most players keep on them at all times. Meanwhile, the Heal Ball is almost the worst Pokeball ever made. It's a perfect example of that 3-headed dragon meme. Immediately, the Heal Ball sets off red flags for me because it always has a 1 times catch rate, meaning it's the same as a Pokeball. It's far from the only Pokeball to be that way though, and the others tend to have some kind of benefit that makes you still want to use them, even if it doesn't increase your catching chances. For example, the Friend and Luxury Balls make it easier to evolve Pokemon by friendship, and Premier Balls are given to you for free. The Safari and Sport Balls don't do anything, but they used to be 1.5 times back when they could only be used in the Safari Zone or bug catching contest, so they don't really count. So what's the added benefit that the Heal Ball gets? It fully heals the Pokemon after catching it. Oh, Yeah, of course, that thing that every Pokemon Center does. And the Heal Ball could only do it once! In generations 4 to 6, a Heal Ball only had the chance to do anything if you did not have a full party of 6 Pokemon, meaning it became obsolete almost immediately. Even if you don't have a full party, healing up the Pokemon is only useful if you want to use that Pokemon immediately. But you could also just run back to a Pokemon Center. It's early game. You don't have a full party. The Pokemon Centers are never that far away. Starting in Gen 7, you get the ability to immediately add a caught Pokemon to your party regardless of whether it's full, so there are more use cases, like you're deep within a dungeon and you found something cool and you want to use it. But even then, it's not that big of a deal to just go back to a Pokemon Center. And if you're deep within a dungeon, you should just use better Pokeballs that you would have by that point, like a Dusk Ball. People also tend to figure out teams of 6 and then just have that for their party for the rest of the game. So like the maximum amount of times you would use a Heal Ball to heal the Pokemon as like a real benefit is like maybe 5. The Heal Ball is not much more expensive than a Pokeball, 300 versus 200, but it is still more expensive. Why pay more for something that is virtually always just a Pokeball? Before I reveal the number 1, just want to quickly ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you've watched this far, clearly you like my videos. And if you want to see more, subscribing's the best way to see them. So hit the button. Thank you. All right, now here's number 1. Number 1, the Love Ball. It is insane to me that this Pokeball exists. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it looks cool. The nice pink heart, you know, it works aesthetically with certain Pokemon, but practically, this is just a hard to obtain Pokeball. Because its catch rate boost scenario will almost never, you know what? No, screw it. It will never happen. The Love Ball has an astounding 8 times catch rate modifier tied with the Level Ball for the highest possible outside the Master Ball. But that catch rate boost only occurs if the target Pokemon is the same species and opposite gender as your active Pokemon. What? When the hell is that gonna happen? The Repeat Ball was on this list because most Pokemon players don't care to catch a Pokemon that they already own. The Love Ball only works if the Pokemon is not only one that you already own, but is one you have with you at the time. And it has to be the exact same Pokemon. An evolved form is not the same species. And even then it may not work because it has to be the opposite gender. Therefore, always female, always male, and genderless Pokemon can never have the Love Ball work on them. And if you have Pokemon in your party that can't be found in the wild, like, I don't know, a starter most of the time, then that's part of your party that already disqualifies Love Ball usage. And you wanna know what makes the Love Ball even worse? In Gen 2, due to a glitch, it only worked on Pokemon of the same species and the same gender. It was progressive and inclusive, and it's not anymore. Unacceptable. I have been playing Pokemon for over 20 years. And not once have I used a Love Ball with the boosted catch rate. It is effectively, you know what? No, not effectively. It is just a hard to obtain Pokeball with a pretty heart on it. And how pretty it is doesn't matter here. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, there's another video on screen that YouTube thinks you specifically will enjoy. And YouTube is pretty smart actually, so you should go check it out. But that is all I have for now. So till next time, Poke fans. Gotta catch them all!